Okay, so we started the parak around 102b1. We have a machlokas. We're trying to deal with the machlokas between Rabbi Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So we had a machlokas that we saw right after the Mishnah, Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, on 101b4. That if someone said, I owe you $100, Rabbi Yochanan says he's obligated, Reish Lakish says he's not obligated. So the Gemara said, what's the case? If he said, you are my witnesses, and then he said to Yosef and Binyamin, please be my witnesses. And then he goes to Shimon and says, I owe you $100. Clearly, he told Reuben and Shimon to be, Yosef and Binyamin to be his witnesses because what he was going to say had significance. He was admitting debt. So there's why would Reish Lakish says you're not chayav? And if he didn't say that, why would Rabbi Yochanan say you're obligated? Wouldn't we? Rabbi Yochanan would agree. Something like, "Oh, I owe you the kitchen sink," But he's saying it as a joke. It doesn't mean anything. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say that it's real? Someone's trying to join the share on Zoom and having some trouble. Oh, so you have my keys still? No, we're recording. Yeah. So the Gemara says he didn't ask Yosef and Binyamin to be his witnesses. So why are we chayev? He said that I already owe you in a shtar. So Rabbi Yochanan saying that because it's already written in a shtar, it's as if he asked Yosef and Binyamin to be the witnesses. And Reish Lakish says no, because he already has a shtar. The shtar is what's being mechayev him, but he is obligating him to pay. But the fact that he made this verbal admission doesn't mean anything. The shtar has power to make it that he owes, but this verbal obligation without appointing witnesses does not have any legal standing. Here, come here, shall have it. So the Gemara says we're on 102b1. Gufa, we had a brisa. Rav Gidol Rav. Rav Gidol sent the name of Rav. Kama tonosin levincha. We may have done this Gemara, but if we did it already, we'll do it another time. It's not a big deal. Here, shall have it come. What? No, no. Okay, if she'll have it starts fetching, she'll come here. So if two future mechutanim, a father of the chassan and a father of the kala, we're talking. Kama tozan levincha. How much are you giving for your son? Kach v'kach. He says, I'm giving this and that. Kama tonosan levincha and he's levitcha and says, how much are you giving for your daughter for the wedding? Kach v'kach. He said such and such. So amdu b'kidshu kanu. So if they got up and were mekadesh, they're obligated. Hein hein hadvar menikne b'mira. Even though they didn't make a kinyan that the father of the chassan was committing X dollars to the wedding, and the father of the kala was committing X dollars to the Y dollars to the wedding or to the dowry. But the kedushin happened right after that. They're obligated to pay just through speaking. They didn't need to make a kinyan. Shall have it. So Amar Rava said, Mistabra Milsa Duraba Bito Nara. This must be that it's a case where the daughter is a Nara, the Kamati Hana Liyade, because he's going to get some money because she's still a Nara. The husband is getting some Kedushin of a Bulgaris, but if she's already a 12 and a half, and so she's already her own adult, the father of the Kedushin goes to her and not to the father of the Kala. So since the father of the Kala is not receiving anything for the Kedushin, it must be that the fact that the Kedushin happened through this speech is not really relevant. So But because since the father of the Kala isn't getting anything, in the case of the Kedushin, it must be that this statement is not referring to a Bogeres. Now, for whatever reason, he's assuming that the father of the Kala has to get something. Now, the father of the Chassan doesn't get anything in either case because the Chassan has to pay the money, and the father of the Chassan isn't allowed to. It has to be the Chassan. So whatever, that was his far. Elohim, but Rava says that is arguing Amar Rav afilu Bogeres. But Rav said, even in a case of Bogeres, the ilo temahachi, because if you don't say this, avia bein mayhana asiliyade, because the father of the son, meaning the father of the chassan, mayhana asiliyade, he's never getting any hana. So from the fact that it works when the father of the chassan doesn't get any money for the, and yet his verbal commitment to a certain amount of money for the wedding is binding. So therefore, even if the father of the Kala, he's not getting anything because his daughter is already more than 12 and a half. And so any Kiddushin money goes straight to her. He also, when he said, I'm giving this and this for the wedding, he's committed himself even without a kinyan. But the fact that they're becoming mechutanim, because this word is from mechutanim, from chasen, from getting married. The kamechatni, the fact that they're becoming machatanim, gamriu makni la dade, they're making a fully binding commitment to each other. Amarle Ravina Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, Dvarim halalu nitnuli kasev, alo nilu kasev. So we're turning on to 102b2 right now. So let's say the father of the chasen and the father of the kala committed to money for the wedding. The question is, once they verbally committed, are we allowed to put it into a written contract? So Amarle Ravashi says, we're not allowed to put it in writing because even though we say that it's binding, but there's a different level of binding when it's written, potentially to take money away from the kuchim. If it was, if a field was his, if it was in a written document, we might say that anything that if he owed money after that, this money would be higher in the priority of getting paid off first, or it could be taken, some of his property might be indebted towards it. But that's not true, so we're not allowed to write it down. Ace of Ace, Ravina asked against Ravashi, saying you're not allowed to write it down from our Mishnah. So remember, our Mishnah was talking about a case where a woman already had a daughter, and she was getting remarried to someone else. So if from her previous husband had already committed to feeding the girl, and now from the new husband is committing to feed the girl, the Mishnah says both the former husband and the current husband have to both pay for her food. So because of that, because let's say the first husband doesn't want to be on the hook if the wife if he would divorce the wife and not have to pay anymore, so the sharp people, the pikchim, would write in their Kesuvos, I will support your daughter for 5 years, kol zman shad imi, as long as you are married to me. But if you get divorced, I'm not going to keep on paying for your daughter. So, and so it said they wrote it in the shtar. So even though we explained the Mishnah earlier that they're talking about that they made an agreement that he was going to feed her, but in fact the Mishnah says kosvim, it shows that you're allowed to write it into a written document. So the Gemara says my kosvim omrim. No, here saying writing doesn't literally mean writing; it just means they would say. But the Gemara doesn't like that answer. But karle lamir ksiva, are we able to say a speech and we say that means writing? The Gemara says yes, vatnan, because we learned in a Mishnah earlier. If a husband wrote to his wife, and in this case, writing wasn't literally writing, but he gave her a verbal assurance that I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to take any claim about your property, the property that you're bringing in to the marriage. Hi, did it stop working? Let's get it working, okay? Let's get it working. Let's get it working. So he's saying I'm not going to contest anything about the property you're bringing into the women to the to the women to the his wife that she's bringing into the marriage. She's still allowed to benefit from the payros, the fruit that the lands generate. He's not allowed to touch the principal or sell the land or stuff like that. But if it's generating profits, he's allowed to use those profits. V'tani Reb Chia ha'omer l'gishto. And Reb Chia explained that the Gemara was only a case of verbal. He verbally assured her that he was going to not claim anything from those fields. Yet the Mishnah called it ksiva. So that's one thing about this about that statement. Tashma. So Rav Ashi again says they're not allowed to write this agreement about what the father of the chassan and the father of the kala agreed to pay for the wedding. Tashma. Let's learn from a different Mishnah. Ain't quotes and story erisin or story nesuin elamidash nehem. We only write documents for erisin or a document of chuppah of nesuin, except from the knowledge and with the consent of both of them, the chassan and the kala. So hami dashneim kosvin. So that implies that if you have consent from both parties, you're allowed to write it. My lav stripe sixa. Why don't we talking about these are documents of how much each side is paying? And Rav Ashi says you're not allowed to write it down. Why don't we say that brisa is talking about what they can? Here, you keep opening these things. Oh, don't touch. Just look. Just look. Just look. Low, star eris and mamish. We're not talking about money that they're saying, oh, if they're getting engaged, I'm committing this much towards the wedding, or money at I'm committing to the household. No, means literally an erisin star. So what's an erisin star? So Rashi in Kedushin, does it say it here also? Yeah, he says it here. So you write on a star, Hareyat Mikudeshas li b'shtar zu, b'shtar zeh. And the halacha is because of so instead of giving a ring and saying, or money and saying, Hareyat Mikudeshas li b'tabazu, he writes on a star, Hareyat Mikudeshas li b'shtar zeh, and he gives it to her. Now the halacha is it's stricter for that because there's a hekesh between kedushin and gittin. So just like a get has to be lishmo l'shem gerushin for the sake of this man, for the sake of that woman, and for the sake of gerushin, a stark erison for kedushin also has to be written on his behalf, on her behalf, and for the shem kedushin. So I guess would have to have both of their names on it also. Well, I mean, Rashi just says here, Harab Mikudeshasli. I don't know if it literally needs her name and his name in the way a get needs, but it would definitely need to be written Lishmo L'Shem Kedushin. And so he wrote a literal ashtar of Erison, that the Erison is affected through this star. And it's not talking about a monetary obligation that he's obligating himself because of the marriage. Kirapapa of Rav Shrevya, according to a statement of Rav Papa and Rav Shrevya, the Itmar, because we learned, so Ksavalishma Shalomi Daita. If a star Erison was written for her name, but not by her knowledge, Rabbi Ravina Amar Mikudeshes. Rabbi Ravina says she's Mikudeshes. Rav Papa Rav Shrevya Amar Eina Mikudeshes. Rav Papa and Rav Shrevya says she's not Mikudeshes. So even though it was written for her sake, the husband wouldn't, or the about to be husband isn't allowed to write the star erison or have a sofa write it for him unless he's telling her, "I'm going to write a star for you." It has to be written with her consent. So it's machlokes amoraim what that Mishnah means, but according to Rav Papa and Rav Shravya, to write the star erison literally means writing a star that says Harat Mekudeshasi, but it has nothing to do with obligating the father of the kala or the father of the husband or the father of the chasan in any monetary obligations. And our machlokus between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, which started us on this long tangent that we're on, is in regard to obligating themselves in financial, writing down certain financial obligations. This isn't a financial obligation, so it's not relevant to that discussion. Okay, Tashma, another question on Rav Ashi's statement. Mesu, if the husbands died, that we're talking about, so our Mishnah said that in a case where a husband committed to paying his for his wife's daughter's food, the Mishnah said that stepdaughter is in better shape than his own daughters because the stepdaughter will get paid she'll get fed from money from even encumbered property because it has the status of a debt, and debts are collected from encumbered property. But for the pay his own daughters, they do not get paid from encumbered property. They only get paid from either cash in the estate or movable properties in the estate, because we're going to see it again later. We suspect maybe he paid her under the table before he died, and she has a stash of money from him. So it wouldn't be fair to take it away from other creditors from the estate. So if these husbands who committed to paying for food for their wife's daughter from a previous marriage, the people, the deceased people, their own daughters are only get money for food from unencumbered property. But this stepdaughter, the wife's daughter, because he had committed to paying her for her food, she gets paid even if it's from encumbered property because she's like a creditor, and just like because of this obligation. So if it's like if she's like a creditor, it must be that this obligation that he's committed to paying for her food must be written down in a star. Otherwise, how could she be like a star? So we see that Rav Ashi, who says that you're not allowed to write it down, but from our Mishnah, it must be that this husband's commitment to paying for his stepdaughter's food must be written down, not like Rav Ashi. So the Gemara says, no, this is a case where they actually made a kinyan that they made a kinyan to pay for it. So therefore, Rav Ashi agrees that if it was a binding kinyan made, then it could be written down. But only things that weren't done through a binding kinyan, there's certain things that through a verbal commitment, it's binding, but it's not allowed to be written down. But this is a case in our Mishnah where they made a kinyan on it, so it could be written down. The Gemara says, if so, Banos Nami, why don't we let his daughters get paid from encumbered property also? So the Gemara says, Kishakanu Lazu, Velo Kanu Lazu. It's a case where they made a kinyan that he was going to commit to feeding his wife's daughter, but not for his own daughter. So then the Gemara says, Umay Paska. So the Gemara says, why would he make a kinyan that way? If he's making kinyan to feed her daughter, he certainly would include to feed his own daughter, right? He would care about his own daughter more than her. Okay, so go tell mommy. Okay. So why would he commit to paying for his wife's daughter and not for his own? So if once he's committing to he's not going to put his own daughters in worse commission. So the Gemara position. So the Gemara gives a different answer. Ihi kinyan mahanila kinyan. So this daughter of his wife already was born by the time they got married because she was the wife's daughter from a previous marriage. So mahanila kinyan. So the kinyan works for her, but banos for his own daughters through this woman, he didn't have them yet because he's not married to her yet. So therefore, he couldn't make a kinyan on them. They weren't born yet. The kinyan doesn't help for that. We saw a Gemara earlier. Don't remember exactly, and it's also Gemara Baba Basra, I think, and maybe in Gittin is can you make a kinyan on davar shelo ba'al olam? Can you make a kinyan for something that it hasn't happened yet? So, for example, I don't remember exactly, but let's say Yisachar and Zvulun I mean, there's a separate question on the Gemara, but let's say Yisachar has a boy and Zvulun doesn't have a daughter yet. But Yisachar says, if you have a daughter, my son will marry your daughter. So that doesn't work at all. Well, but let's say that so because he doesn't have a daughter, so he can't make a kinyan if the daughter doesn't exist. I think the Gemara has a shaila, maybe it's a takeaway. I don't remember exactly if Zvulun's wife would be pregnant at the time, and say if your wife marries gives birth to a girl, I'm giving you kedushin for her. I think there's a suffix about that, but it's something that doesn't exist that you can't make a kinyan in. So the Gemara doesn't talk about that issue right here, but because he didn't have these daughters yet with this wife, he couldn't make a kinyan. Now, could he make a kinyan on other daughters he has from a previous marriage? Yeah, just like the Gemara said, the line above. Okay, now we're on 102b4. Milo askina and Dahavi b'shas kinyan. But can't we talking about with daughters that were already born at the time that he's making kinyan with this wife? They're just like this daughter from the wife is from a previous marriage. These daughters of the man are also from a previous marriage. The hechidami could go into girsha v'hadre, or it's a case where they even could be from this woman, but he had divorced her, and now he's remarrying her. So he could include his own daughters in the kinyan, just like her daughter from a previous marriage is getting going to get fed. So that's a strong possibility. Ella, so we have to give a different reason for why his daughter's worse off than his wife's daughter. Ihi delesa b'tanai beistin, the daughter of the wife, who's not included in the tanai beistin, that the beistin in the time of of the Gemara said that the girls get food from the estate of their father, Mahani la Kinyan. So the Kinyan works for her because she's not his daughter. So she's not going to get fed on it otherwise. So the Kinyan works for her. But Banos, his own daughters, Disnu b'Tanai Beistin, is already included in the Tanai Beistin that they're going to get food. Lo Mahani lohu Kinyan. The Kinyan doesn't work. So the Gemara asks Migra Gari, are they because the Basin already took care of them, they're in worse condition that a Kinyan isn't going to work from them? So Gemara says Ella benosav hainu taima. So it has nothing to do with the Tanai Basin. We have to give a different reason. Kavan de isnu b'Tanai Basin. Amar trari aspasinhu. Because they're already included in the Basin, we're saying that he left them literally a bundle. A tzror is like a bundle of money. We also use that. The Chumash also uses that by the brothers who went when they went to Yosef the first time, and after they left, one of them went to feed his animal, and he found that his money was still in his pack. So it's Tror Kaspo. So the Tror, the bundle of money. So basically, we're saying he gave her money under the table before he died. So therefore, if we would let his own biological daughters get money from creditors or from encumbered property, I should say, it's really double paying, and it's taking money away from the creditors that they didn't deserve. Okay, 2 dots near the bottom of Kuf Beis Amud Beis. Amrav Chisda. Okay, so the Gemara mentioned something interesting, and Rabbi Kiva Eger mentions the Shitim Gubetzes here. I wasn't able to find. I'm very interested to know what Rabbi Kiva Eger was trying to say here. So he mentioned that. So the Mishnah mentioned that if one father had or one husband of this woman had obligated himself to feed the daughter, and she got divorced and remarried to another man, and she convinced the new husband also committed to paying for her food, she gets food twice, and also they have to send the food to where so the first husband, the ex-husband, would have to send the food to the place where the wife currently is. He's not able to say, okay, I'll feed her, but she has to be here to get the money. The Mishnah says that he has to send the food to where that daughter is. So Rav Chisda says, Zos Omeres Bas Eitzel Ima. We see that the place of a daughter is with her mother. So Rashi points out that if the father would die and the sons of the father, meaning this girl's brothers, are in charge of the estate now because their father died. They inherited it. They also have to send the money to where the mother is. They're not allowed to say she stays with the estate. No, she stays with the money. That's what Rav Chisda is saying. So mimai de Vigdola skinan. How do we know this is a case where she's a Gdola already? She's 12 and a half or older. Mela, we understand that when she's a little girl, she should stay with her mother. Maybe once she's a Gdola and she's able to do everything she needs to do by herself, maybe she's not supposed to be by the mother anymore. Dilma b'ktana skinan. Maybe this is only when she's a ktana. Umishum ma'isa shahaya, and the only reason this is a terrible. If the anti-Semites on social media would hear about this Gemara, it'd be a big chol Hashem. So Mishum Ma'isa Shahaya, because of an incident that happened. The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, Misha Meitz V'Niachlo Ben Katan Li'imo. If someone died and he left a very young child, so Yorshei Av Omrim Yehei Gadol Etzleinu, the heirs of the father could say, "We're going to raise him." Ve'ima omer hey b'ni gadol etzli, and the mother says, "Let me raise my son. He's a little kid right now. So let me raise him till he gets a little older." So the Brisa says, "Manichno so etzel ima." We keep him with the mother. And manichno so etzel roi liyorsha. We do not keep him with people who would potentially inherit with him, or perhaps meaning that would be his brothers, or potentially if the father didn't have, if this is the father's only son, then the father's brothers, meaning this boy's uncles, would be the heirs. And from the fact that this boy is alive, they're not going to get any Yerusha anymore because that's halacha. If a man dies without any son or daughter, his brothers are the closest relatives, and they would get the Yerusha. Ma'isa haya ushchutu erev harishon. So it happened one case where the heirs of the father said, "No, we'll take care of him." And this is a terrible thing. They killed him. The first night that they had the kid, they killed him because they are getting more money this way. Because if he was a Yoresh, he was going to get a share of some sort. So they killed him so they would get more money. A terrible, terrible thing. So it could be that only the katana that only if it was a minor, it would stay with the mother. But maybe once she was not a minor, maybe she would go to the father's house. So the Gemara says, Im kain lisni lamakom shehi. It should say the place where she is. It doesn't say to the place where the mother is. It just says where she is. Possible that she is near her brothers. So it seems that whether the daughter is a katana or a gedola, they have to bring it to where she is. It doesn't matter if she's a minor or, because it says to the place where the mother is. How come it doesn't say where she is? Because it doesn't matter where she is. Let me just see what the Mishnah says. It says lamakom she'ima. You have to the place of her mother. The lamakom ima. It should say the place lamakom shehi where she is. My lamakom she'ima. As we turn to kuf gimel amud aleph. Why does it say it's the place where her mother is? Shmat mina bas eitzalaim loshna gdalav loshna hitana. It shows us that the place of a daughter is near the mother. It doesn't matter if it's a adult daughter or a minor daughter. I mentioned when we did the Mishnah that this would seem to have an effect in regard to the halachos of custody. But I was looking it up and I couldn't find this Gemara brought as a source for that. In general, besides the fact that we would think that a boy needs male role models and a girl should have female role models, but also let's say in regard to a father and a son, the father has an obligation to teach the son Torah and this and that. So obviously they would need to be together for him to do that. And then there is So this Gemara actually says because of a terrible incident that happened, we would keep a minor boy. Well, if the father's alive, there's no chashash that the father's going to kill him. So when the boy, depending on how old the boy is, for up to 2 years old, would he stay by the mother, and the mother would have to nurse him? We learned the Gemara Perek a few prakim ago about the obligation for her to nurse the son if she's no longer married to the husband, or would until the boy is shas chinuch, 6 or 7 years old, where he could start going to school and learning. Should he be by the mother until then? So there are halachas about that, but I couldn't find in let's say Shulchan Aruch or the Rambam that they were bringing this Gemara as a source for that. Ramosha spoke about this about 25 years ago. It was either it was probably summer of 2000. Back then, Elian Gonzalez was a boy who had one parent in the United States and one in Cuba, and I think they sent him back to Cuba. And so Moshe was talking about from a halachic perspective, depending on the age, should he be with the father, should he be with the mother? Lo Yom Rushnehem. So the Mishnah says that if two fathers had committed, or two men had committed to paying for her, they both have to send food to her. They can't say, well, she doesn't have to eat twice. Since they committed, they're obligated. So how gaver to ogre le rechaya lechavra letchina. So so this is a choshen mishpat shaila. There's a certain person who rented out a mill for this guy to grind his wheat. So it seems that I don't remember if this was he was renting him. Ruvain had a mill and he owed money to Shimon. I don't remember if it was for rent. Well, we'll see. The Gemara is actually going to say what it is. And he owed money to Shimon, but instead of paying cash, he's paying Reuven he's paying Shimon by letting Shimon grind his flour in Reuven's mill. So instead of giving him cash, he was giving him the service of milling his flour into wheat for him. L'sof yatar. I think he was he's renting whatever. In the end, oh, the ogre so he had a mill and he rented him the mill, and the payment for the mill was, even though it's not his mill anymore because he rented it out, but the payment was he could get his wheat ground there. That's what it is. So then the guy got rich, or he got richer at least. Zav and Rechaya v'chamra, and he bought a mill and a donkey, and he didn't need this other guy anymore. So Amarle, he said, Ada idna havatachina gabach. I used to mill my stuff by you, but now I have my own mill, and I don't need to use the mill that I rented for you anymore, because now I own two mills, one that I rent out and one that I have. Hashta havli agra. So now pay me money as rent. I want money, not the right to grind my wheat over here. Amarle, the renter said, no, I'll still grind up your wheat. And he was refusing to pay cash. So Savar Ravina Lamemer, Ravina thought to say, Haino Masnisin. This is the same case as our Mishnah. Lo Yomu Shneim Harei Nuzonin Oso Kacha. The two men are not able to say, let's just pool our money and just feed this girl once. Ela Echad Zana ve'Echad Nosin Latamei Mazonos. One has to actually give food, and one will give the value of food. She doesn't need to eat twice, but because he committed, so one of them has to give money as the value of the food. So she doesn't need. So since, even though he committed to feeding her, since she already has food, she doesn't need the food, so he could pay her money. So in this case, because the owner of the mill doesn't need the mill, he could get paid in cash instead. Amalei Rav Avira, but Avira said to him, Midami, is this case really similar to that case? Hasam chad kresa isla. The girl, there's only one stomach in the girl. Tarti kresa leisla. She doesn't have two stomachs. She's not going to eat double food. So the only way to fulfill the obligation is to give money, not food. Hacha Meitzer Amarle, but here, Matzi Amarle, the renter could say, Tchon v'zabin, Tchon v'osev. My thing is, our agreement was to grind. So even though you have your own mill, and you were able to mill your personal needs by the terms of this lease, now you're you can mill extra wheat and sell that wheat and for the cash. So instead of just because you don't need it for your own use, you could have other wheat and grind it in my mill and sell it. So I'm not going to pay you cash. You can take the cash that you by selling this wheat that I'm going to grind from you by according to the terms of our lease. Below Amra, so that's what Avira said, and that seems to be that we're paskening. We're saying that the renter is not cannot be forced to pay cash rent now that the owner doesn't need the service of the grinding anymore, and he prefers cash. He's not allowed to demand cash. Below Amran, and we only said this al delay rechaya. That's only when this guy doesn't have enough to use the mill full time. But if this guy has enough business that he could keep the mill going a full shift, and if he would, without grinding the original owner's stuff also, in this case, we require him to pay cash because there's a thing we see in Pirkei Avos, and it's also Gemara Bava Basra, that in Pirkei Avos it says that if someone who says what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours is a fool, and if someone says what's yours is yours and what's mine is normal, but some say this is the Midah of Sodom. In Sodom, they were so anti helping each other out and sharing things. What's mine is mine and it's not yours. What's yours is yours and it's not mine. I'm not going to take it from you. But just like I'm not going to ask you, you're not allowed to ask for me. So it's being very greedy. So the halacha is there's a halacha that kofin amida Sodom. If someone is being unreasonable to keep his own stuff, even when he has no loss to give it up, that's midas Sodom. And in such case, we force him to give it up because he's not losing anything. He's just being greedy by not sharing it. So in this case, where he has enough business running this mill, he doesn't own the mill, he's renting the mill, but he has enough money that he's busy full time, and he's still refusing to pay cash to the guy who's the owner. In that case, we say that he's not allowed to be greedy and refuse to pay cash. In that case, he's doing a full day's work because he has a lot of business. He has enough cash to spare to pay the rent. That's what the Gemara is saying. No. Well, the agreement was to mill the flour for him, but the first guy didn't need any more, so he says pay me cash. So what the Gemara is saying is that in such a case, so the Gemara is saying. So normally, so Rav Avira was saying. So Rav Avira said the normal case we would stick to the rules of this, and even though you don't need to use my milling services anymore because you bought another mill, still that's the agreement. So Rav Avira actually is saying like what you're saying. They stick to the terms of the agreement. But the Gemara is saying if he's not losing anything by paying the cash because he's making enough money because he's always busy, he has full time, he has enough people milling by him that he's always busy, he clearly has enough money, and therefore, even though by the letter of the law he's not obligated to, but by him being greedy and refusing to pay, that's midas Sodom. So the reason isn't because it's different than what the agreement is, but we're saying in that case he's being greedy and midas Sodom. He's not losing out by paying the cash. So therefore he has to pay the cash. Mishnah. Amana sha'amar yafshi lazuz mi beis baili. So let's say the widow says, I can't move out. I have to stay living here. The Yorshim, the husband's sons, are not allowed to tell her, go back to your father's house and we'll send money for you. Elazananosa, they have to feed her where they are and keep her there. For Nasan mother lefikvoda, and they have to give her dwelling according to the respect and honor that's due to her. Amra, yes, she loves him to base Abba. If she says, I can't leave my father's house, meaning she wants them to have to send money to her, send food to her in her father's house, um, and she's not willing to come to pick up the check, let's say, or to pick up the food from them. They are allowed to tell her, if you would stay here, we have nice lodging for you according to your respect that you need. If you live here, we'll give you the food. But if you're not going to stay in this housing that we have for you, then we're not going to feed you. We're not going to give you food. But if she's saying that I can't leave my father's house to get the money because she's young or and her husband's sons, who are the Yorshim, are young also, so it's improper for them uh, to be going to the same to live in the same place. Then they have to give her food, even though she's living by her father's house and not in the house of the deceased man. Tanarabana, we learned in the Brisa, Mishtameshes b'mother, Kedech Shemishtameshes b'chaye ba'ila. They have to give her use of living quarters that are in the same level that she used when her husband was still alive. They has to have the same amount of servants and maid servants that she had when her husband was alive. The quality or the type of pillows and blankets that she used when her husband was still alive. She has to be able to use the silver and gold vessels that she used to use when her husband was alive. She doesn't need an upgrade from that, but we're not allowed to downgrade her from that. That's what this Bryce is saying. Shakha Kasavla, because he wrote her in the Ksuva, Va'at Tehei Yosef de Bevesi Umi Tazna Min Chasi. You're going to live in my house and be fed from my property. Kol Yemei Megar Armelusa Bevesi. All the days that you are a widow in my house. So in the house, meaning whatever she had before, she gets to keep. Tani Rav Yosef taught, Bevesi velo bevikti. But that's if it's a house that has a few rooms. But if all he has was a bika, which is so this means it's like it's a hut or like a teepee type thing. So there's not enough room for his kids and her. Then in such a case, she's not entitled to the same level anymore because when he was alive, so he and his wife took precedence over everyone else. Now that he's not alive, the kids need it, and because it's a small hut, so in that case, even though the ksuva says that she gets to keep commensurate with what she have, in this case, when it's a hut, she's not able to keep it. We will leave it here, I guess. Okay.